I was still in my pajamas when I walked into our bedroom and found Daniel on his knees in front of the open suitcase, shoving shirts and pants into it like the house was on fire. His movements were frantic, his eyes fixed on the clothes instead of me. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice cracking halfway through. No answer. Not even a glance in my direction. He just kept folding, no, not folding, cramming like the speed mattered more than the mess. My chest tightened. 20 years together, and this was the goodbye? No warning, no explanation, just the sound of zippers and hangers clattering to the floor. When I stepped closer and grabbed his arm, he shrugged me off so sharply I stumbled back. "Daniel, talk to me." Finally, he looked at me, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Nothing. No remorse, no sadness, no hesitation, just a cold determination that felt like ice water in my veins. "I'm leaving today, Laura," he said. "Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments." At first, my brain refused to process the words. Leaving sounded too temporary, like he was talking about a business trip or a weekend getaway. But the suitcase was nearly full, and his phone face down on the nightstand like it had been for months, buzzed once before he snatched it up and shoved it in his pocket. I felt my pulse thudding in my ears. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice so small it didn't sound like mine. "I'll figure it out," he said, zipping the suitcase with a finality that made me flinch. Then came the words that turned my fear into raw panic. "I need you to transfer my half of the savings to my personal account." My half. Our savings. And in an instant, the realization hit me so hard my knees nearly gave out. The money. Chloe's college fund. Every dollar we'd built together over years of sacrifice gone if I let him walk out with it. I didn't wait for an explanation. I ran downstairs, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood. Chloe was at the kitchen table in her school uniform, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Nothing, sweetheart. Dad's just going on a trip." I lied, the bitterness in my throat almost choking me. I grabbed my laptop, my hands trembling so badly I could barely type. When the bank page loaded, my vision blurred. Our checking account. $180. $2.46. Our savings. 0. Chloe's college fund, the one we'd been feeding since she was a toddler, the one that should have had $80,000, also showed 0. I refreshed the page once, twice, 3 times, as if the numbers might magically change. They didn't. I checked the transaction history, and there it was in black and white. 3 days ago, while I was at my book club, Daniel had transferred everything. Not just his so-called half, everything. I was still staring at the bank screen when Chloe's voice cut through the ringing in my ears. "Mom, don't worry," she said, setting her spoon down with deliberate care. "I handled it." The words didn't match the moment. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. And the man I'd built my life with had just stolen every cent we had. And my 13-year-old daughter, my baby, was telling me she'd handled it? I blinked at her, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "What do you mean, you handled it?" Chloe didn't flinch. She met my eyes with a calm, steady gaze that felt so out of place on her young face. "We'll talk after school, okay? I'll miss my bus." She grabbed her backpack, slung it over her shoulder, and was out the door before I could say another word. I just sat there for a few moments, staring at the door she'd walked through. It was like she had stepped out of the scene, leaving me alone in a kitchen that still smelled faintly of her cereal and my growing panic. That entire day I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept circling back to her tone, so certain, so adult. What could she have possibly meant? How could a 13-year-old handle the fact that her father had just drained our accounts and walked out? When Chloe came home that afternoon, she moved through the kitchen like nothing was wrong. She unpacked her lunchbox, tossed her apple core in the trash, and poured herself a glass of water. I hovered by the counter, watching her every move. "Chloe," I said. "About what you said this morning." "I know, Mom," she interrupted, taking a sip of water. "You want to know what I meant?" "Yes," I said quickly. You can't just tell me you handled something like this and then disappear for 7 hours. She set the glass down and looked at me in that same measured way she had before. I've known about Dad and Vanessa for 6 weeks. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What? I saw his phone one night. He was in the hallway texting when he thought I was asleep. I didn't recognize the number, but the messages, they weren't from a coworker. Her voice didn't waver. So I started paying attention. I noticed the late nights, the meetings that didn't match his calendar. And then I found her name. Vanessa, I said. The syllables tasting like ash. She nodded. Vanessa Clark. She works at Dad's firm. Handles client investments. My throat was dry. You've known for 6 weeks and you didn't tell me? I wanted to be sure, Chloe said simply. And I wanted to figure out what to do about it. Something inside me twisted at her choice of words. She wasn't saying she'd wanted to tell me, she was saying she'd wanted to act. I sank into a chair. Chloe, you're 13. This isn't your responsibility. Yes, it is, she replied, her tone as firm as if she were telling me the sky was blue. He didn't just hurt you, he stole from me. My college fund, my future, and someone had to do something. She crossed the kitchen, opened her backpack, and pulled out a worn spiral notebook. She handed it to me without hesitation. Here. This will explain it better. I opened it and felt my breath hitch. The pages were filled with notes, dates, names, account numbers, printed screenshots, even diagrams that looked like flowcharts of transactions. What is all this? I asked, flipping through page after page. Evidence, Chloe said. Dad's not good with passwords. He uses the same one for everything. I guessed it in 2 tries. Once I was in, I could see everything: emails, bank accounts, text messages. He didn't even log out most of the time. Vanessa's just as bad. She uses her last name and the year she graduated college for almost every account. The room suddenly felt smaller. My daughter had just admitted to hacking into her father's and his mistress's private accounts like it was nothing more than a homework assignment. Chloe, this is illegal, I managed to say. So is stealing $80,000 from your kid? She shot back, not raising her voice but slicing straight through my protest. I stared at her, this girl I'd raised, suddenly looking like someone I didn't quite recognize, focused, unafraid, and entirely in control. What exactly have you done? I asked slowly. She pulled her laptop from her bag and flipped it open. On the screen was a folder labeled History Project. She clicked it, revealing a maze of subfolders with names like financial records, communication logs, and asset transfers. It started with his second phone, she explained. I saw him checking it late at night. One day he left it charging in his office. I had 10 minutes, so I got in, took pictures of everything. That's how I found the first emails to Vanessa. Oh, she clicked through screenshot after screenshot messages from Daniel to Vanessa discussing our new life, hotel bookings, and chillingly, how to deal with Laura without losing too much money in the divorce. My stomach churned. Then, Chloe continued, I started tracking transactions. Vanessa's been stealing from her clients for years. I have proof bank transfers, fake invoices, investment statements that don't match the actual accounts. How did you even get into her work computer? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She logs into her email from home sometimes. She didn't clear her cache. From there, it wasn't hard. I rubbed my temples, caught between disbelief and a strange, reluctant admiration. And you've had all this for how long? About 3 weeks, Chloe said. I needed time to organize it. Make sure I had enough to stop them. I may grow. Stop them from what? From buying that house in Florida, she said without hesitation. They used your employment info and my social security number to apply for the mortgage. I caught it before it went through. I stared at her. You stopped it? She nodded. The application is flagged. They can't move forward without triggering an investigation. My hands tightened on the notebook. Chloe, what you're telling me is that I've been watching them, she finished for me. Every email, every text, every transaction, I know where the money went, and I know how to make sure they can't get to it again. There was no bravado in her voice, no gloating, just certainty. I exhaled slowly, the weight of what she'd said settling over me. My 13-year-old daughter had been living with the knowledge of her father's betrayal for weeks, quietly building a case, quietly protecting us while I'd been blissfully unaware. A part of me wanted to tell her to stop immediately, to hand everything over to the police and let adults handle it. But another part, a larger part, recognized that she'd already done more to secure our future than I had since this nightmare began. "Chloe," I said softly, "this is a lot. For anyone. Even for me." "I know," she replied, closing the laptop. "But I'm not scared of them, Mom. They should be scared of me." The way she said it sent a shiver through me. I wanted to hug her, to tell her she was safe now, but I knew that wouldn't be the truth, not yet. This wasn't over. But for the first time since Daniel walked out that morning, I felt something other than panic. I felt hope. It took me a few seconds to process what Chloe had just said. My daughter, 13 years old, was standing in the middle of our kitchen, calmly explaining that she'd hacked into her father's emails, his bank accounts, and even his work records. Not only that, she was claiming that he and Vanessa were using our names, our actual identities, to borrow money and buy a house in another state. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "Chloe, how far did you go?" Her expression didn't change. "Far enough to know what they're planning and how they're doing it." She walked to the dining table, set her laptop down, and powered it on with a confidence that made my stomach twist. "Come here," she said. "I'll show you." "Oh," I hesitated, glancing at the dark screen as it flickered to life. This was the kind of moment where, as a mother, you want to scold your child for crossing boundaries, but the boundaries had already been obliterated by the man who was supposed to protect us. Chloe opened a folder labeled Civic Studies Project. Inside were dozens of subfolders with titles that made my pulse spike: mortgage applications, credit reports, loan statements, email archives. "This," she said, clicking the first folder, "is the application they submitted for a house in Georgia. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, $260,000. They put down $80,000 as the initial payment." I felt the blood drain from my face. $80,000. "My college fund," she finished for me, her tone sharp but controlled. On the screen was a scanned mortgage application form. My name was listed under co-borrower. My employment information, salary, workplace address was right there. Chloe's social security number was filled in under dependent. My breath caught. "This is identity theft." "Yes," she said matter-of-factly, clicking through the attachments. "They also applied for 3 credit cards in your name and 2 personal loans in mine. Those loans are still pending, but if they're approved, we'll be looking at over $200,000 in debt we didn't take out." I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to absorb it all. "How did you even find these?" Chloe tapped the screen. "Dad's personal email is linked to his work calendar. He schedules everything down to phone calls so he doesn't forget. When he applied for the mortgage, the lender sent confirmation emails. I intercepted the digital copies by setting up an auto-forward rule in his inbox." She made it sound like she was explaining how to change a light bulb. "Then," she continued, "I got into Vanessa's work account. She uses her work email for personal stuff, which is stupid. I found bank statements and loan documents stored in her drafts folder. She never sent them, probably because they were forged." I stared at the screen, at the digital proof of what my husband and his mistress were doing. The documents were neat, professional, and deeply fraudulent. "Chloe, this is dangerous," I whispered. Her eyes didn't leave the screen. "It's more dangerous to do nothing." Ugh. She opened another folder labeled Financial Web. It was a diagram, circles connected by lines, each circle labeled with a name, a bank, or an account number. "This," she explained, "is how they're moving the money. Vanessa transfers small amounts from client accounts into a shell company. Dad invoices that company for fake consulting work, and the money gets funneled into a joint account they share. From there, they send it to prepaid cards and online wallets. Oh, how do you even know how to map something like this? I asked. Tutorials, she said simply. There are channels on YouTube that teach you how to trace transactions. It's just pattern recognition once you know what to look for. I wanted to be horrified. I wanted to tell her that she shouldn't even know how to do any of this. But another part of me, the part that had been sleepless and powerless for days, was almost relieved someone was paying attention to the details I had missed. They've been planning this for months, Chloe went on. The affair started long before you suspected anything. The money transfers began 3 weeks before the first late meeting. And the mortgage application? That was filed the same day Dad told you he needed you to cover his part of the property tax. A memory stabbed through me, Daniel handing me a crumpled bill saying he'd just been short this month. I'd paid it without question. They're sloppy, Chloe said, scrolling through a list of transactions. They use the same password for most accounts. They don't hide their metadata. Half of this was easier to find than my own school assignments. My head was spinning. Okay, I said slowly. So you found out what they're doing. But what are you going to do with it? Her gaze shifted to me. Steady and unblinking. Stop them. Block the loans, freeze the accounts, and make sure they can't use our names again. And then... She hesitated for the first time, her jaw tightening. Then I'm going to make sure they answer for what they've done. A chill ran through me. Chloe, that's not your job, it's the police's job. The police can't do anything without evidence, she said. I'm giving them evidence they can't ignore. She clicked to another folder, case file. Inside were labeled PDFs, time-stamped screenshots, audio clips of phone calls between Daniel and Vanessa. She'd even saved a recorded video call where they discussed clearing out the accounts before Laura notices. My stomach turned. They think we're powerless, Chloe said, her voice low but intense. They think we'll just cry and move on while they start over somewhere sunny. They don't think I'm paying attention. I sat down heavily in the chair beside her. You've been living with this for weeks, I murmured. Just quietly working on this while going to school. Doing your homework, eating breakfast, like nothing's wrong. She shrugged. Pretending nothing's wrong is part of the plan. Dad can't know I'm onto him until I've shut everything down. There was a maturity in her voice that felt both impressive and deeply unsettling. What's your next step? I asked cautiously. I've already contacted the credit agencies, she said, pulling up a list of confirmation numbers. I froze your credit and mine. I flagged the mortgage application as fraudulent. The lender has to investigate before moving forward, and that will take weeks long enough to dismantle the rest of their setup. I exhaled shakily. And Daniel? What happens when he realizes you're behind this? She met my gaze without hesitation. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. There was no arrogance in her tone. Only certainty. And in that moment I realized she wasn't just reacting, she was strategizing. It was terrifying. It was brilliant. It was my daughter. Chloe didn't waste time. That evening, after we cleared the dinner dishes, she disappeared into her room with her laptop and that spiral notebook full of dates, account numbers, and evidence that would make any investigator's mouth water. I sat in the living room with the television on low, pretending to watch a documentary but really just straining to hear the faint, rhythmic clicking of her keyboard upstairs. 2 hours later, she came down with a legal pad covered in bullet points. She dropped it on the coffee table like a project manager presenting deliverables to a client. Okay, she began, tucking her hair behind her ear. Here's how we're going to dismantle them. The "we" made my chest tighten, but I didn't interrupt. Step 1. Organize the evidence. Every screenshot, every email, every document I pulled is now tagged by date, source, and relevance. I've separated them into 3 main categories: financial crimes, identity theft, and professional misconduct. Each category has a digital folder with corresponding physical copies in case anything gets deleted. She flipped the page to a diagram that looked like something out of a law enforcement training manual. Step 2. Distribution. We're sending the right pieces of evidence to the right people so they can't ignore it. Vanessa's employer will get proof of her embezzlement. The mortgage lender gets documentation showing the application was filed with stolen identities. And the State Financial Crimes Unit gets the whole package, including how the money moved from her clients to Dad's accounts. Nout. I swallowed hard. Chloe, that's big. It has to be, she said simply. If we only send it to one place, they can cover for each other. But if every relevant party gets a piece at the same time, it's harder for them to make it disappear. She returned to the legal pad. Step 3. Freeze everything. I've already locked our credit, but tomorrow I'll file fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus and the FTC. That will flag our names in their systems, so if someone tries to open a new account, it triggers an investigation. Arna too. Her tone was methodical, almost surgical, and I realized she'd been carrying this entire plan in her head for weeks. How did you figure all this out? I asked quietly. Research, she said, tapping her pen on the pad. There are forums for people dealing with identity theft. I read case studies, followed how victims fought back. Most of them lost because they didn't act fast enough. We're acting before the loans finalize, before the property closes, before the accounts disappear into offshore shells. She stood, picking up the legal pad. I'll start with Vanessa's employer. Her company's compliance department is required by law to investigate any credible claim of client fund mismanagement. Once they see the bank transfers and fake invoices, she's done. The next morning, she was up before I was, already typing at the kitchen table with a mug of cocoa by her elbow. She drafted an anonymous email to Vanessa's firm, attaching a curated set of documents just enough to prove guilt without revealing her own identity. The subject line read, Urgent, Evidence of Client Fund Misappropriation by Employee Vanessa Clark. By the time she gets to her desk, this will be in her inbox and in her boss's inbox, Chloe said, clicking send. And I've blind copied the State Regulatory Board for Financial Advisors. I watched her work. A strange mix of pride and unease swirling in my chest. This wasn't a child taking shots in the dark, this was precision. After that, she moved on to the mortgage lender. This time, she used the official fraud reporting channel, uploading a full copy of the loan application alongside proof of our real signatures for comparison. They'll have to freeze it immediately, she explained. Forgery is a felony, and lenders don't like being pulled into criminal cases. By lunchtime, Chloe had sent 3 separate packets of evidence, one to Vanessa's employer, one to the lender, and one to the state's Financial Crimes Investigation Unit. She'd also filed reports with Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, as well as the FTC's identity theft portal. Now we wait, she said, closing her laptop with a satisfying snap. But the waiting didn't last long. 2 days later, I was pouring coffee when Chloe came into the kitchen holding her phone. Vanessa's been suspended, she said matter-of-factly. It's all over the office group chat. Someone from HR escorted her out. I stared at her. You're sure? Screenshots don't lie, she said, sliding her phone across the counter. On the screen was a thread of messages from what looked like an internal work app employees gossiping about Vanessa being pulled into the big conference room and packing up her desk. The same afternoon, Chloe received an email from the mortgage lender confirming that the Georgia house application had been flagged and placed under fraud review. They thanked her for her timely intervention and assured her no funds would be disbursed. That evening, we both got official letters from the credit bureaus confirming the fraud alerts were in place. Any attempt to open new accounts in our names would now require direct phone verification. I sat at the kitchen table holding the letter in my hands, feeling the tiniest sliver of security returning. Chloe, you actually did it. You stopped them. She looked at me, her eyes steady. I'm not done yet. The next step in her plan was more aggressive. She wanted to tip off Vanessa's clients directly, people whose investment accounts had been siphoned to feed this scheme. They deserve to know where their money went, she said. And the more victims there are, the harder it will be for Dad and Vanessa to spin this. She composed a brief, anonymous message and attached account statements showing the unexplained transfers. She didn't include our names or connection to the case, only the facts. She sent the packet to 6 different clients she'd identified through Vanessa's work emails. The fallout was immediate. Within 48 hours, Vanessa's employer was facing a client exodus. The regulatory board launched a formal investigation. By the end of the week, Chloe's plan had worked its way through the system like a controlled detonation, every charge precise, every target deliberate. But it was when she moved to step 4 that I realized she wasn't just thinking about stopping the damage, she was thinking about payback. Step 4 was titled Reputation Collapse. It involved seeding verified information into places that Daniel and Vanessa couldn't control. Online court records, professional blacklists, and even a few local community forums in Georgia where they'd been planning to move. If they try to start fresh there, people will already know, she said simply. Watching her, I felt that same conflicted mix of awe and unease. She was 13 years old and orchestrating something that looked like a cross between a corporate compliance investigation and a criminal sting operation. By the end of the month, Daniel's accounts were frozen pending review, Vanessa's professional licenses were suspended, and every fraudulent loan application was denied or canceled. And Chloe? She was already drafting her next set of steps, ones she wouldn't tell me about, until the confrontation came. The first real hit landed on a Thursday morning. I was halfway through loading the dishwasher when Chloe came downstairs with her phone in hand, her expression as calm as if she were reading me the weather report. "Vanessa's out," she said simply. I set down a mug. "Out? What do you mean?" "She's been suspended without pay," Chloe replied, sliding the phone across the counter toward me. On the screen was a screenshot from what looked like an internal company chat lines of messages from employees buzzing with gossip. Compliance called her in first thing. She was in the conference room for an hour. Another line read, "She came back, packed her things, and left with HR." There was no need for me to ask how Chloe had access to this. I already knew. "They told her it's pending a full investigation," Chloe added. "It won't take them long to find what I gave them." The screenshot felt heavier than paper. This was no longer just evidence sitting quietly in digital folders, this was real-world fallout. Vanessa Clark's shiny professional image was already starting to crack. By the next day, the crack became a collapse. I was making tea when Chloe's phone pinged 3 times in rapid succession. She picked it up, scanned the screen, and gave a small, satisfied nod. "Clients are pulling out," she said. 2 investment accounts closed this morning. Another one is moving all funds by next week. Word is spreading fast. "How do you know all this so quickly?" I asked. She didn't even look up from the phone. "People talk when they're angry. And angry clients like to talk to each other." I pictured Vanessa in her immaculate office, watching her career disintegrate one phone call at a time. A small, shameful part of me felt relieved. After everything she'd done, after helping Daniel gut our savings and using my daughter's name to steal, I couldn't summon any sympathy for her. That weekend, the local business news site ran a short article. "Clark and Weston Investment Partners facing client exodus amid allegations of misconduct." There were no names yet, but Chloe and I both knew Vanessa's face would be attached to that headline soon enough. While Vanessa's professional life was unraveling, Daniel's was imploding in parallel. On Monday, Chloe checked the public property records for the Georgia house they'd tried to buy. The status was now marked, "Pending fraud review." She turned the laptop toward me. "The deal's dead," she said. "Even if they cleared their names tomorrow, the seller's not going to wait around for a buyer flagged for identity theft." I stared at the words on the screen, feeling the smallest flicker of safety return. That house had been the foundation of their new life, and without it, the fantasy they'd built together had nowhere to land. It didn't stop there. By midweek, Chloe received confirmation from one of the credit bureaus. Multiple accounts in Daniel's name had been frozen due to suspicious activity. "This means he can't open anything new, and anything he already has will be reviewed," she explained, scrolling through the email. "If the bank thinks those accounts were funded illegally, they can seize them." I sat back, trying to imagine Daniel's reaction. The man who had always strutted through life confident in his control over money, suddenly finding every door locked, every phone call from the bank starting with, "We need to discuss some irregularities." It wasn't just financial. His professional reputation was taking hits too. 2 days later, Chloe discovered that Daniel's employer had received an anonymous tip, complete with excerpts from his mortgage application, and flagged financial transactions. "They won't fire him right away," she said, "but they'll be watching him now, and they'll be careful about giving him access to client funds." That night, I overheard Chloe on the phone in her room, her voice steady and controlled. She wasn't gloating, but there was a certain satisfaction in the way she recounted the week's events to whoever was on the other end. I caught phrases like compliance audit, asset freeze, and regulatory board. It sounded less like a teenager catching up with a friend and more like a project manager running through a checklist. By the end of that week, the plan she'd laid out on that legal pad had fully unfolded in the real world. Vanessa was effectively unemployed, her professional licenses suspended pending investigation. Her clients had scattered, many of them filing formal complaints with the state. The investment firm itself had been placed under regulatory review, which meant any hope she had of landing quietly at another company in the same field was gone. Daniel's dream home in Georgia was gone. The mortgage flagged and canceled. His accounts were frozen or under scrutiny, his access to money shrinking by the day. His professional standing was damaged, his employer suspicious, and his credit profile shredded. And all of it had been set in motion by a 13-year-old girl sitting at a kitchen table with a laptop. That Saturday morning I found Chloe in the living room, her feet tucked under her on the couch, typing away with that same quiet focus she'd had since the day Daniel left. "You've done it," I said, sitting across from her. She didn't look up. "I've done the first part," she corrected. "The damage is unfolding now. They'll be dealing with the fallout for months, maybe years." "Chloe." I hesitated, unsure if I was about to praise her or warn her. "You understand how big this is, right? This isn't just stopping them from buying a house. You've changed the trajectory of their lives." She finally looked up, her eyes steady. "They were going to change ours. Permanently, without asking." There was no anger in her voice, just a clear, unwavering belief that she had acted in proportion to the harm done. That afternoon, Chloe pulled up an article on her laptop and turned it toward me. "State Financial Crimes Unit opens investigation into regional embezzlement scheme." The piece was short, but buried in the middle was a line. "Preliminary evidence suggests possible collusion between an investment firm employee and an external party to misappropriate client funds and obtain fraudulent loans. They're not named yet," Chloe said. "But it's them. By next month, the names will be public." I leaned back, letting the reality sink in. Vanessa wasn't just facing a career setback, she was staring down the possibility of criminal charges. And Daniel was tethered to her in every way that now mattered. The phone rang later that evening. I didn't have to check the caller ID to know who it was. I let it go to voicemail, my heart thudding as the message notification blinked. I didn't listen to it right away, but Chloe did. Her face didn't change as she handed the phone back to me. "He's desperate," she said simply. "That means it's working." I didn't press her for details. I didn't have to. The desperation was inevitable. By the end of that week, the balance of power had shifted entirely. The people who had thought they could strip us of everything, our money, our security, our names, were suddenly the ones scrambling, explaining, and losing ground every single day. And Chloe? She was still calm, still composed, still moving pieces on a board, only she seemed to fully understand. The hits had landed, and for the first time since Daniel walked out with that suitcase, I realized we weren't just surviving. We were winning. The phone rang in the middle of a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, rinsing lunch dishes, when the familiar name flashed across the screen. Daniel Bennett. For a moment I just stared at it, my hands dripping into the sink. He hadn't called in weeks, not since the morning he walked out with that suitcase. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. I dried my hands on a dish towel and swiped the screen. "Hello, Laura." His voice was different, tight, strained, with a sharp edge I hadn't heard in years. "We need to talk. Something's going on, something really bad." I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice flat. "What kind of bad?" "Don't play dumb. My bank accounts are frozen. I can't access a cent. The mortgage for the house in Georgia was denied. Vanessa," his voice cracked for a fraction of a second. "Vanessa lost her job. The state's investigating her. And now my email's been hacked. Someone's in my accounts, opening files, sending things I didn't write. This is coordinated, Laura. It's someone with skills." I could hear him pacing wherever he was, the sound of his breath quick and uneven. I think someone's targeting us, me and Vanessa. And I think it's personal. I didn't respond right away. I was aware of movement behind me, Chloe, standing in the kitchen doorway, her school uniform still neat, her backpack hanging off one shoulder. She didn't say anything, just walked to the table and set her bag down, her eyes flicking to the phone in my hand. Laura, Daniel said. Did you hire someone? A private investigator? Some hacker? Because if you did, you need to call them off now. What they're doing is illegal. They're destroying me. How? I opened my mouth, but Chloe stepped forward and held out her hand. There was no hesitation in her eyes, no question about what she intended to do. Slowly, I placed the phone in her palm. She lifted it to her ear. Hi, Dad. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Chloe. Oh, thank God. Sweetheart, you need to tell your mom to stop this. Someone's attacking me. They're making me look like a criminal. Chloe's voice was calm, almost gentle. You don't need help to look like a criminal, Dad. You did that all by yourself. Chloe, you took $80,000 from my college account. You used my social security number on a fraudulent mortgage application. You opened credit cards in Mom's name, and you helped Vanessa steal from her clients. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was sharp. Who told you that? Nobody told me. Chloe replied evenly. I found out. I have copies of everything. Emails, loan documents, bank transfers. Every lie you told. This is ridiculous. You're 13 years old. You don't understand how complicated. I understand that you chose her over us. Chloe cut in. Her tone still even but harder now. I understand that you chose money over your family. And I understand that you plan to disappear and leave us with the debt you created. I could hear Daniel's breathing change faster, heavier. Sweetheart, I know it looks bad, but I was going to pay it back. Vanessa had this investment opportunity. Stop! Chloe said sharply, for the first time raising her voice. You're still lying. You didn't take that money for us. You took it for yourself. You took it to impress her, to build a new life without us. So own it. I was frozen, listening to my daughter speak with a clarity and authority I'd never heard from her before. Chloe, please. Daniel tried again, his voice cracking now. I'm living in my car. I can't get a job because my credit is destroyed. Everything is gone. You've made your point, just stop. Chloe's reply was soft, almost tender, and somehow more devastating because of it. You think this is about making a point? No, Dad. This is about consequences. You taught me that when you walked out of our house with your suitcase. Actions have consequences. You chose yours. Now you get to live with them. The silence on the other end was total. Goodbye, Dad, Chloe said, and ended the call without waiting for a reply. She set the phone down on the counter and looked at me, her expression unreadable. He won't call back, she said. I swallowed. How do you know? Because now he knows I'm watching, she said simply. And he knows that every move he makes I'll see coming. She picked up her backpack and walked toward the stairs. I have homework, she added, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the silent phone on the counter. My hands were trembling not from fear, but from the weight of what I'd just witnessed. My daughter had faced her father down and dismantled every excuse he had left. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't cried, and she hadn't wavered. She'd simply told the truth. And she was right, he had chosen money over us. And now, for the first time, he was the one who had to live with the loss. That night, long after Chloe had gone to bed, I lay awake, replaying the conversation in my mind. I could still hear Daniel's voice pleading, defensive, scrambling, and Chloe's steady replies cutting through every one of his rationalizations. I thought about the day he left, about the sound of that suitcase zipper closing, and about how powerless I had felt in that moment. And I realized something. I wasn't powerless anymore. Neither of us were. After the confrontation with Daniel, I expected Chloe to slow down, maybe even collapse under the weight of everything she'd done. She was only 13. Most kids would have been crushed by the stress, the secrecy, the emotional toll of dismantling their own father's life. But Chloe wasn't most kids. Instead of retreating, she redirected her focus. One evening, I walked past her room and saw her hunched over her desk, not with her usual folders of evidence, but with a blank Word document open. The title at the top of the page read, Family Financial Protection. Warning Signs and Recovery Strategies. "What's this?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. She looked up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "A guide," she said simply, "for other families, so they can spot fraud early and know what to do." I stepped inside. "You're writing this? For kids?" "For anyone," she replied. "But I'm starting with families like ours. Families that trust the wrong person and don't realize it until it's too late." On her screen were section headings like Recognizing Financial Red Flags, How to Secure Your Digital Accounts, and Steps to Take After Identity Theft. Each section was detailed, practical, and written in plain language. No jargon, no scare tactics, just facts and steps. I sat on the edge of her bed watching her type. "You know," I said slowly, "most people would want to forget something like this happened." She shrugged. "Forgetting doesn't protect anyone. Understanding does." Over the next few weeks, the guide grew into something remarkable. Chloe pulled examples from real cases she'd read online, combined them with lessons she'd learned firsthand, and even created sample forms for reporting fraud. She included screenshots showing where to look for unusual transactions in online banking dashboards, how to freeze credit, and how to check public records for unauthorized loans. The more she worked, the more focused she became. And then, one night at dinner, she announced her next step. "I'm going to start an online consulting service," she said matter-of-factly, as if she were telling me she'd joined a new club at school. I nearly dropped my fork. "Oh, what?" "An online service," she repeated, "to help people protect their finances and recover from fraud. I'll do video calls, review documents, walk them through freezing accounts, whatever they need." "Chloe, you're 13, I reminded her. "People will expect to be talking to an adult." She smirked. "They will be. On the internet, age is just a number in a profile. What matters is what you know and how you present yourself." She already had a plan. She'd set up a website under the name E. Bennett, Family Security Consultant, using a clean, professional template and stock images of smiling families. She offered tiered services, basic security checklists, in-depth fraud analysis, and full recovery support. Payments would go through an encrypted platform linked to an account I managed for her. At first, I thought no one would bite. But within a week, she had her first client, a woman in Ohio whose brother had drained their father's retirement fund. Chloe spent 2 hours on a video call with her, walking her through the process of filing police reports, contacting the bank, and freezing the account. The woman paid Chloe $75 an hour, and then word started to spread. Through online forums and private Facebook groups, people began recommending E. Bennett as someone who really knows their stuff and actually gets results. Within a month, Chloe had 6 regular clients, all paying her for consultations. By the end of that month, she had made more than I earned in 3 months at the library. One evening, I found her at the kitchen table, her laptop open to a spreadsheet. She turned it toward me, and I saw a neat breakdown of her earnings, expenses, and projected income for the next 6 months. "I've already replaced half my college fund," she said. "By the end of the year, I'll have it all back." I stared at her, caught between awe and concern. "Chloe, are you sure this is what you want to be doing? You're still a kid. You should be—" "What? Hanging out at the mall? Pretending this didn't happen?" "Mom, I'm helping people. Real people. People who are scared and don't know where to start." She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "I know what that feels like, and I can make sure fewer people feel it." Her clients started leaving glowing testimonials on her site. E. Bennett saved me thousands in legal fees. I got my money back thanks to her guidance. She's the only one who listened and actually had a plan. And then, something unexpected happened. A local community center asked if she'd be willing to give a presentation over Zoom to parents about protecting their families from financial scams. She agreed without hesitation. I sat beside her during the call, off camera, watching her share her screen and walk through her slides. She spoke clearly, confidently, and without notes, breaking down complex topics into simple steps. She didn't just give them information, she gave them a sense of control. When it was over, the center director emailed me personally to say she'd never seen such engagement from the audience. It was strange, watching my daughter transform before my eyes. The same girl who, 2 months earlier, had been quietly eating cereal while her world collapsed, was now a sought-after voice in a space most adults found overwhelming. But perhaps the most telling moment came one Saturday morning when I overheard her on a call. She was speaking to a teenager, maybe 15 or 16, whose mother had been quietly draining her college fund to cover gambling debts. "I know it's scary," Chloe said, her voice gentle but steady. "And I know it feels like you're trapped. But you're not. I'm going to help you protect what's left and make sure it doesn't happen again." I stood in the hallway, listening as she explained, step by step, what the girl needed to do, how to change passwords, how to monitor accounts, how to document evidence without tipping off her mother. She didn't just give advice, she gave hope. When she hung up, I stepped into her room. "That was incredible," I said. She shrugged. "Just another Saturday." But I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't just about getting back what we'd lost anymore. This was about turning something ugly into something powerful, something that could protect others. By the end of that month, she'd added a free resources section to her website with downloadable guides, checklists, and templates. "Not everyone can afford a consultant," she explained, "but everyone deserves the tools to protect themselves." And in that moment, I realized something. Chloe hadn't just survived what Daniel and Vanessa had done to us. She had taken control of the narrative, reshaped it, and used it as fuel to build something that could outlast the damage. She was no longer just my daughter. She was becoming a force, one that understood the worst people were capable of, and was determined to shield others from it. 6 months later, our lives didn't look anything like they had the morning Daniel walked out with his suitcase. We were living in a smaller apartment now, but it felt lighter somehow. No shadows of lies lingering in the corners, no constant anxiety about what I might discover in a bank statement. And Chloe? She had become something I still struggled to wrap my head around. Her website had grown into a hub of resources for families facing financial betrayal. She had clients in 5 different states, community centers requesting her virtual workshops, and even a small network of other teens she'd trained to help friends protect their savings and personal information. To the outside world, she was just another 8th grader backpack slung over one shoulder, laughing with friends at the bus stop. But to the people who'd found her through whispers in online support groups, she was something else entirely. A lifeline. A hero who didn't care about credit or recognition, only results. Sometimes, I'd watch her at the kitchen table, earbuds in, laptop open, coaching someone through the steps to freeze a compromised account or file a fraud report. Her tone was calm, confident, and impossibly patient for her age. And I'd think, Daniel didn't destroy us. He forged her. It's a strange thing to admit that the very act meant to break us instead became the spark that lit something extraordinary. His betrayal could have buried us both under debt and shame. It could have left me bitter and Chloe fearful. Instead, it forced her to see the truth about the world far earlier than I ever wanted her to, and she refused to let that truth crush her. She didn't just survive it, she weaponized it, turning her pain into a toolkit, her anger into action. She built something that didn't just restore what we'd lost, but reached far beyond our own little family. One evening, we were sitting on the couch when she got a message from a woman in Texas. "Because of your guide, I caught my husband draining our daughter's savings before he emptied it completely. I can never thank you enough." Chloe read it silently, then locked her phone and leaned back, her expression unreadable. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Just thinking about how many people never see it coming." There was no pride in her voice, just a quiet understanding of the work still to be done. And I realized that was the final gift in all of this. Not just the recovery of our finances, not just the protection of others, but the knowledge that the worst thing someone ever did to us had planted the seed of something unstoppable. Because betrayal can bury you, or it can become the reason you rise. Daniel may have chosen himself over us, but in doing so, he unknowingly gave his daughter the fire to protect families he'll never even meet. And that fire isn't going out. Looking back, I've learned that betrayal, as devastating as it feels in the moment, doesn't have to be the end of your story. When Daniel walked out, he didn't just take our savings, he ripped away the illusion that security comes from someone else's promises. At first, I thought we were powerless. But watching Chloe turn pain into purpose taught me that real strength is born in the moments you think you have none. She refused to be defined by what was stolen from her. Instead, she built something that protected not only us, but countless other families. The lesson is this: life will hand you moments where trust is shattered and your foundation crumbles. You can let that bury you, or you can choose to stand in the rubble and start building something stronger, wiser, and untouchable. Pain can paralyze you, but it can also sharpen you, make you more aware, more resilient, more determined. I realized security isn't a gift someone gives you, it's something you create for yourself, brick by brick. And sometimes the very person who tries to break you ends up forging the steel you didn't know you had. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.